Hi there, and welcome to Hey Sound Guy, the podcast where I will be peeking behind the curtains of the wonderful world of music. Each week I will be speaking to engineers, musicians, and industry professionals. We'll have a little chat with them, share some fun stories from the road. Now my next guest is a good friend of mine. I've known him for quite a long time. We toured together with James McCartney, where he played keys, guitar, did BVs. He teaches at BIMM London. He is a expert level Krav Maga teacher and practitioner. He runs a studio in which we are having this podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy. Please welcome my good friend Hugh Neal.
Hello.
Hi, thank you very much for doing this.
You're more than welcome, Terence.
Thank you for inviting me into your fantastic and beautiful studio.
Yeah.
Which is looking absolutely ace. It's just
pleasure.
Yeah, man.
It's good to have you down.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
It's been overdue. I've been meaning to come down for a while. But here I am now.
Hello.
And, hello.
On the bike.
Yeah, on the bike. Yeah, back on the bike, which is it's a blessing because public transport sucks.
It can be long, yeah. Especially out here, you need it.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. Yeah.
Waiting for buses around here will be long.
Yeah, I can imagine it's not ideal.
No.
Right. How I normally start is if you can introduce yourself and tell us how you got into this lovely world of music and sound engineering.
My name's Hugh Neal. I've been essentially working in sound pretty much from when I was about 14, 12, maybe even 12. I remember doing the two tapes. So you record something on one tape, play that back, and then record on the other tape, and you're literally bouncing constantly. So multi-track recording with a cassette tape, basically.
Brilliant.
I remember doing that in my room. Yeah, so I studied music. I studied vocal, guitar, performed for a long time, but always had in the back of my kind of mindset that I just love the studio, love the way that the studio works, and it's always been a kind of a passion, really.
You're quite a technical minded person.
Yeah, it was, but I've always had the studio thing happening. I've always been kind of working with that, and recording, engineering, and so forth. I never really understood what I wanted to, where my role sat in the industry. I think especially when I was younger. When I moved to London, I kind of had that "going to be a musician" kind of thing. And playing, and love it, and absolutely love it. But I just found that the roles that I was filling were quite unpredictable. So it's always working for artists, as we well know.
Yeah, you
always end up on the sort of kind of the whim of the change. So as soon as they go, "We don't need you anymore," you're like, "Oh, okay, now I've got no work."
You don't even get an email.
It's all on the grapevine. That's it, Phil. Yeah,
I'm still waiting for that email.
Yeah. You could be waiting a while, I think.
Still waiting for the next tour.
I'm booking the flights. But because of that sort of kind of nature of the beast, I like the idea of being in the studio with. There's a lot of different facets that you can do, but you can do it, especially in the studio. You can do it with a cold. You can do it with a broken leg. You can do it with a busted hand. You can't play or tour when you're injured or ill. Now, as much as I still enjoy doing that stuff, this is really where I love to be. It's nice having everything running on my own sort of schedules. I can kind of dictate a little bit more when and where I work, and it's just that. It's probably about 2012 is when I really started focusing hard on my main sort of gist of attention. Was like, right, okay, I'm gonna really get into engineering and more predominantly mix engineering. And it's just with this space here, working with Chris Webb, that he's a fantastic producer and of course a great engineer. It's like the two of us working together. It's allowed me to develop my engineering side of things more. Mixing and so on.
Great. So. Is it? It's not exactly the same, but it's quite relevant with. Trying to remember who said it. Is like always be the worst player in the band. So you're going to learn. You're going to get pulled up.
Yeah.
So it's the same with engineering. I mean,
sounds like something Miles Davis would have said.
I was going to say Miles Davis, but I wasn't 100% sure, and I don't want to misquote. But yeah, I mean, I find the same thing live engineering as well. When I work with better engineers than myself, and I mean, that's basically everyone. I get pulled up. You know, I learn 100%. New things, and you know, my workflow increases. You know, it becomes quicker.
I think it's really important, especially because with the nature of this industry and with what's going on, if you are a little bit of a jack of kind of all trades, master of none style, you will sort of kind of just float. But what you need to be is sort of focus your attentions to something specific, but constantly be learning in that field. Because it's so easy to just become almost irrelevant,
complacent as well. You know, like, okay, I know what I'm doing now, that's it, that's me sorted. And that's, you know, that's not a place where anybody should 100%. Really be ever.
I always had this mentality though, when it went, and this is from when I was in college, when I was like 16. I've always wanted to try and I'm very aware in my headspace that I'm never going to be necessarily like the world's best. I'm not that kind of person, and that's partly because I don't have that sort of drive. I'm inherently kind of a bit lazy. I like to work hard to be lazy.
You're right.
So I like to have a relaxed, non-stressful life. I don't like to put stress on myself. But I always had this thought and this sort of kind of thing that drives me, that I remember very distinctly when I was doing my guitar. So I studied guitar initially in college, doing a BTEC in music production and recording,
right.
or popular music performance and recording, sorry. And the guitar teacher who was there, phenomenal player, and he's still a big guy in the scene, especially around Midlands. And he's a ridiculous player. And I'm like, I'm going to be better than you. And I'm not. At all.
Well, you said
100% never going to happen, because he, of course, was doing what his job is, and it was constantly upping his standard. So he was maintaining skill, he was being better, learning new stuff, challenging himself all the time.
I find that teaching really does drive you forward.
100%. You know? And it's like with that sort of kind of mindset of like, right, I need to be at least in my head better than you, or try to be the equal or better than you. I think with that sort of kind of thought process, then even if you're not, it doesn't matter. You're advancing yourself in a way that's actually like, I'm driving, where I am now isn't enough. I need to be more than that. And that's the thing. It's like, yeah, so if you're the worst player in the room, or you're the worst person in the room, so to speak, the only way is up. If you surround yourself with people who are worse than you, then of course you are the top. So you don't have to try. And you find that with a lot of kind of...
It's also, you got to, you know, be careful. Not necessarily, but in our line of work, but, you know, don't get pulled down. You know, don't,
yeah.
But I mean, with something like this, where it's a technical skill and it's a learned thing, and it kind of becomes, you know, part of you. So it's unlikely that you'll get pulled down.
Yeah, I think you'd have to have a really sort of kind of unfortunate situation to pull you in that wrong, and that could be, of course, anything, you know. But most of the time, because you have your standards, you have what you work for. I always find the one thing that kind of grates me, or is the thing that I berate people for, especially if they come and work with me, is irrespective of what you're doing, if you've agreed to do it, you do that to the 100% of your ability.
Oh, yeah.
I don't care how much you're getting paid. I don't care what the terms are. You said you would do this. So if you say you do it and you give me a half-assed job because you're getting paid half the fee, then it's kind of a bit mad, because what does the fee mean? It doesn't mean anything. So if your full fee now might be half fee in 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's still, the job's the same. You're still doing the same mentality. Of course, your skill set potentially is better. But ultimately, if you don't think it's worth doing the job because the money's not right, or the time or anything, then just don't do it.
Yeah.
Simple.
There was a fellow I had a podcast with, Brian Reeves. He's the director. He heads up basically the AV department at the Design Museum.
Right.
And he said something that if you go in there and you're not doing the job to 100%, maybe you're doing somebody else's job. You know, maybe you're not in the right job.
Yeah.
If you don't have the drive, and like I always say, it's about integrity. You know, because for me, every job I do is an interview for my own job. As a freelancer, especially, you know, you're only as good as your last job. These sorts of things. And if you go in there, like you say, with this sort of, well, I'm only getting a little bit of money, so I'm not really going to put my heart into it. But for me, the money obviously we gotta pay bills and shit.
Yeah, of course.
But that is irrespective of how I'm going to do my work, because you gotta do the job right, to be able to then move on and
that's it.
Maybe get the.
And I think that's the thing. It's like because we sort of kind of attach financial rewards to quality. It's like, well, I get it, and it also can be quite damaging for people doing a lot of work for nothing, because it damages the people like ourselves it's our profession. And it's like, well, if you're constantly offering services, if all of a sudden waiters there's like 60% of the waiting industry do it for free or for half pay, well, the people who are doing that as a job, as their like profession, they're in high-end waiting, they'll be like, well, I can't charge this anymore because there's a lot of people.
Market of undercutters. And
it's unfortunately in our industry, it's a catch-22. It's like, why do I need a live sound engineer? It's like, well, it'll sound better, and that will convey the message and convey your artistry better. Yeah. It's like, why do I need to pay for recording or mixing? It's like, well, that's what you're going to try and sell.
Yeah.
It's why do you need a good guitar? It's like
exactly.
And it's I think the more as we're getting into the technology and technology is more available, I think that's helping us a little bit, but also hindering in the sense of people like, well, I can do this myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can absolutely 100%. You can do this yourself, but it's not the equipment and the physical act, it's the skill that you get, the experience from us, and that's what you're paying for.
Yeah.
I was talking to a friend of mine who's a locksmith, and it works in every life, and he was helping somebody get into their house, so it's a lockout, and it took him maybe about a minute to get in. Because he identified the problem, he knew exactly what to do, he had the tools.
Yeah, but it took him a while to get there.
And the person was complaining. They were like, well, hold on, why am I paying you this money? Because you only took you a minute. And he's like, well, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to leave you outside for half an hour?
Yeah.
And then charge you the same money? It's like, well, no, you're paying for my experience. You're paying for my ability. It's like, I think my dad said... You
were locked out, you wanted to get in, that's what you paid for.
It's like the old adage of the mechanic. It's like, you take the car into the garage and he gets a hammer and hits it and the car works. And the guy's like, well, I'm not paying for that. It's like, okay, it's £100. It's £10 for the use of the hammer, £90 for my experience. To know where to hit to hit the engine sort of thing. So that's what you're paying for. It's like the gear itself it's just gear. It's a tool. In the wrong hands, you can do just as much problems than you can... with anything, so it's kind of I think a lot of it, people are starting to kind of understand that filmmakers, photographers, musicians, people behind the scenes, sound engineers, recording engineers, all these guys are actually, the cost is well worth what you're getting.
Yeah,
Stan's wondering.
It's drooping just a little bit. 100%. It's I always say, because I've had this sort of discussion with some of the staff at the venues where I work, where they're like, well, why do you get paid what you get paid? I'm like, well, it's not, we don't get paid for when everything goes right. We get paid for when things go wrong and we need to fix it in a jiff.
Yeah.
It needs to be sorted out straight away. You've got a full house, there's 225 people in there, you've got a band
100%.
90% of the time guys that's been around, and they, so there's a level, an expected level, plus working in some of the, world-class venues.
Yeah.
There's also an expected level, and anything less than that is unacceptable. You pay peanuts, you get monkeys.
Yeah.
And, we don't, because, none of us are monkeys. I mean, I might be, but,
but it's
swinging off the rafters.
It is that kind of like, the mark of the professional is the speed of recovery. So if you think that you see an amateur working, it's the mistakes are made, and then it's very obvious mistakes made. In any industry, you can have that in the reception. You go to the reception, checking into a hotel, and somebody new there is just panicking. It's like all of a sudden it's not working, and they're just new. They're amateurish level. As soon as you have a professional, then all of a sudden what you've got somebody who's able to just go, yeah, no problem, boom, done, sorted.
That's it. Fix it in a second.
And you wouldn't even, and to most of the time, especially when in our job, people don't even notice the mistakes have occurred.
Yeah.
So they just go, that was great, that all worked, and you're like, actually, there was so much went wrong then.
Yeah. I'll tell you about that over a beer.
Yeah, you just didn't see it.
Yeah.
It's like you didn't notice, and we get that in every sort of. I had it a lot in playing but as long as you kind of don't make a big deal of it, it's cool.
There's that 90% confidence that comes in there as well. I mean that's one of the things that I also say, that what I have developed over the years is, I mean, I'm not a shy person, but sometimes you get maybe intimidated or whatever. But I've always found that the best way for me to go in, when a new artist comes in, or even people that I've worked with before, is the very first thing. As soon as they walk in the building, I walk up to them like, "Hey, I'm T. I'm your sound guy today. Whatever you need, we'll sort it out. Let's work on this and make it a great show." 100%. And then immediately they're like, okay, right.
We're on the same side.
He's not sitting in the corner. He's not like whimpering. He's not on his phone. He's here and he's present. And whenever there's a fault or a mistake, because I make mistakes, fuck man, it happens, right? Yeah. Especially during a sound check, you are gonna have some times where there might be feedback on stage and things like that. But if you can communicate that to the artist and say, listen, this is what happened. This is why it happened. I'm on it. I've fixed it. Try it now. Good, great, fantastic. Yeah. That 10 seconds right there, they'll be like, okay.
Well, it's that first impression,
especially
isn't it?
with bands, because I can kind of see how traveling bands would have it hard when they don't travel an engineer with them, right? So you get into a new venue and you never know exactly what the venue is going to be like. You don't know what the house staff are going to be like, what the house 100%. Engineer is going to be like. You walk into a place and it's dirty and your green room's not right, and the engineer's sitting in the corner and he's on his phone or whatever, right? That doesn't build confidence in a performer.
Yeah, 100%.
And immediately there's going to be some air there, and there's going to be. But if you can come in as an engineer and yourself, doing any of the mixing or the producing or the recording or whatever you do, if you come in with the confidence, you're just like, right, guys, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to go about it. Set out the rules and set out the whole everything in a nice way, but confident. Yeah. And people are immediately going to be a little, a bit more at ease and be able to do their job.
Yeah.
More fluently,
because
that's what it is. I'm here to serve the band, right? I'm not here for my own purposes. Yes, I get a kick out of doing good sound, and I love it when a show sounds great and it feels good, and you can see the musicians are enjoying themselves and the crowd's enjoying themselves. And then there's, but there's just that.
No, 100%. I think that's well put. It's kind of that. Especially from my perspective, from a playing side of things. And that's one of, I suppose, my kind of advantages to an extent, is I understand what it's like from both sides of the table. Yeah. So I understand how much shit engineers get from inexperienced musicians and people who don't really understand what's going on. So you always give people the time. You're like, hey man, do your thing. That's your side of the I'm not going to say anything. You crack on. I'll be up here doing my job. You do your job. We're cool. But very rightly, it's the guys that you get, or the ladies, the girls, whoever, the people who come in to do the job, it's the ones who are straight away, there's a communication. It's not like, hey, sound guy. Literally, it's like, and especially when you've got distance, you can't be like, you're waving, hey man, yo, and it's like, what? You're like, well, you've not got the right attitude in the first place. So an engineer, for having that attitude, is the same as a musician having the same. Oh, mate, come on, sort it out. It sounds just crap on stage,
Yeah, I mean that's another thing where
talk to me.
I've been going on about this, where it should be like even just a 1 day. One course, one
training how to speak,
one module, or not even a module, but like one lesson for musicians and also for engineers on how to deal with the other side and also how to deal with members of the public. Yeah. Because so often, you get people who are just maybe they don't have anything better to do, or maybe they think they know better. And there's always like a dad of somebody or a mum of someone.
My mate calls them the Fender dads. It's the guy, is that a real Fender Stratocaster? Is that a USA? I've got one at home. It's that sort of person. It's like, look, mate, it doesn't matter about the gear. It doesn't.
No.
It's like, so they come up and try and drop their 2 cents in, and you're like,
the best one I had. I've mentioned this story a few times, but there was an old fella. I think he was the dad of the pianist. It was a support set, and he come up to me. He's like, "Oh, you need to turn the piano up," and I just sort of leaned forward, and I'm like, "I don't think so." With respect, to me, it feels like it sits nice in the room. It's not. It's like, no, I used to do your job, and I'm like, well, with all respect, I don't think so. And also, why aren't you doing this job anymore?
Yeah, you're not doing this job now.
Yeah, why aren't you doing it anymore? Were you not good enough to make it, or what's the?
Yeah, it's like,
and obviously, I've been to shows where the sound hasn't been great, right? And I can pick out 100 things that the engineer did wrong, but I'm not going to go there and say to the guy, you know what, Sonny, what you need to do is this or that. Because I don't like it when people do that to me. If another engineer comes and tells me this, somebody that I know is an engineer, not just some guy who walks up and like, oh, I'm an engineer as well, I will take it on board. Even whoever it is,
you can choose
the dickhead that wants the piano louder, I will still take it on board and have a little think about that. Am I right? Am I wrong? Obviously you get degrees, and then you get the DFA fader as well.
Exactly. And if you notice on the desk, we've got the SFU, like the shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up
instead of cut.
The DFA stands for does fuck all. And then sometimes you have to just say to people, listen, sorry, but go away, because you're now impeding my ability to do my job because I'm having to engage in a conversation with you.
Yeah, I mean, I get this with fixes on mixes most of the time. So when a band artistry or whatever comes back to me with their notes, again, all notes are valid. Most of the time, though, if it's a note of a particular instrument, so a guitarist going, I think there should be more guitar, or the vocals, I think there should be more vocal, or the drums, or whatever, and that's the only comment.
More of everything.
Most of the time, I just ignore it, to the extent of, I'll listen and go, maybe, sometimes it's a taste, it's an artistry, because the thing is, of course, with live sound, you're doing a job to balance it for the whole room. So you're like, well, look, I'm trying to give the performers the opportunity to convey their sentiment and performance to you in the best possible way. So if you've come to see the piano and you're hearing drums and bass, it's like, well, that's part of the whole thing.
Be aware there are other people in this world apart from you. Exactly.
You wouldn't go into a restaurant and just sit in the middle and go, well, I wanted to sit by the window. I don't understand why you have to sit next to me. It's like, well, you're sharing the space. Do you know what I mean?
It's
like
a public space.
Yeah, so it's like, Whereas when you're talking about something like, say, for example, a mix or something, especially when you have like the producer, the artist, and all this, there's a lot of people's opinions coming in that we have to sort of kind of navigate a little bit and discuss. And it's obviously it's a lot more slow process and long-winded. And of course, the advantage that I have is we can go back to previous revisions. Live, you can't. It's happened.
There's no take two.
It's like, that was the end of the show. Oh, can we just go back to the second song sort of midway through? I think the piano could be a little bit louder. It's like, nah. Sure. That's just happened, mate.
I'll fix it in post, bro.
Exactly. Yeah, cool. I'll send it to you tomorrow. Just leave your email. So, a lot of that, it's kind of, because, and that's the difference. It's like with when we come to this sort of stuff, and what I see is the difference between live and the recording side. With the recording side, of course, we have time to get that sound to capture. So then once we've got that kind of right, it's really down to the person to do the job, and then you can do it as many times as you like.
Exactly,
With live, you are limited to that, because you're like, well, I can do as much as I kind of can pre-show.
Time,
But even then, you've got to predict what potentially could happen, because, of course, as we well know, somebody comes out, and this is again experience of the performer, but drummers and singers are the classics for this. It's that kind of like, okay, do you want to just check your mic? Yeah, 1 2 1 2. Okay, no. It's like, okay, cool. Is that how
your performance level?
Yeah, and they're like, yeah. This is how I do it. Okay, cool. We ready? And you're like, oh my, it's like brutal. So that's like not what you were doing then. And I find that, especially with, I used to find it with live, that you would always find the band creeps. As soon as the energy gets there, they get excited. start show to end show, you're like, wow, you've really started to go in.
Yeah.
And it's some of whenever I've kind of dabbled in live sound, that's some of the things that I'm aware of, but I don't focus too much on. And I end up kind of starting off giving them a bit too much, let's say, and then I've got kind of nowhere to go other than down. Yeah,
sound check louder than the gig. I mean, I always do that. See where you can go to, then you dial it back, so once they start, because it'll always be a vocalist. Because once the band gets going behind them, then obviously
they need more.
They need more of themselves and these sorts of things. And that's one thing that everyone else don't always understand, because I've had a chef which I've had to kindly invite to go back to his kitchen because he's walking through and was like, "Oh, this is really loud." I'm like, yeah. And then he came past again and was like, "This is really unacceptable. You have to turn this down. This is so loud." And I just looked at him like, "Listen, man, I'm doing my thing. What do you do here? You're the chef. So get the fuck back in your kitchen."
Yeah,
okay?
I'm going to come and tell you
Let me do my thing. I don't tell you how to cook burgers. I don't,
Exactly. You're not saying your burgers are too hot, man.
Yeah.
Can you just make them a bit cooler, please?
I have a way of doing my things. You have a way of doing your things.
Exactly. If you've got something in the venue that stipulates a certain particular volume or something, it's like, yeah, cool, stick to that. But there's nothing worse. It's like an absolute vibe killer than getting to a point where it's like, this sounds great. And then they go, "Can you turn it down?" And you're like, "Oh, right, okay." So now everyone has to play a little bit quieter.
Yeah.
And it's also, I always find it's with venues that they just completely misunderstand the act that they've got in.
Oh, that happens.
And you just think, what? But what do you think was going to happen? It's like,
You've got a 12-piece salsa band on stage. What did you think it was going to
It's like, that stuff is going to be loud because it's never going to be mic'd, essentially. So the gear is designed to make volume. So you put that in a venue with limited capacity, it's like, well, yeah, it's going to fill the space, man.
Yeah, it's definitely going to fill the space. I mean, you get a guy like Mike Stern in, and he turns it up.
Yeah, exactly. That's how he gets the sound.
That's how he gets his sound. Yeah, and if you're not prepared for that, then And
I think it's sometimes again that comes back to that sort of kind of trying to make the money and they go, "Oh, if we get that person in, we can make the money and it'll be fine. So let's just make it happen." And you sometimes think, what, I get it. Yeah, it's like, but I think it's almost like you get to this point where people think that anything can be solved. And to a degree, anything can be solved. Yeah. But
then don't complain about paying me what you're supposed to pay me.
But then it's that whole idea of like, we are going to piss some people off though. It's like, if we find that happy medium where everybody's happy, artist happy, client is happy, venue's happy, engineer happy, that kind of happy medium only exists because some people were compromising.
Yeah.
Mostly us. Yeah. Because we listen to everybody else and go, all right, so you want it quieter, you want this. So I'm trying to strike that balance between the venue and I do it with the producer and the artist or the management and so on.
There's always someone to appease.
So you're just trying to find that way. And it's like, and it's one of those things that I've always kind of, especially in the studio, it's the idea that anything should be tried. So if somebody says to me, if somebody's not liking the drum sound or somebody doesn't like what's going on and they want to try something different, I can know that that's not going to work. But I should still try it for them.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, and the funny thing is, in my head, I'm like, this is never going to work. We do it and I'm like, but it sounds great. So that's a great idea. I was like, that sounds so good, and you're right, it works. So although it's like, this is an effort, or this is going to be make my life a little difficult or something. It's like, I used to encourage people to, especially when you start working with somebody, just see if they're prepared to do something, almost just to test
something that's just ridiculous.
And it comes a little bit from the Stevie Wonder idea of like, he'll test producers, and apparently he did this with I think it was Pharrell, and he did a solo on the harmonica, and it's a terrible solo, and it just sounded terrible. And then he did it, and then was like, I think we've got it. What do you think? And like that moment of like for like
am I going to tell
panic
Stevie
going,
Wonder?
how do I tell
No.
Stevie Wonder it's rubbish? And he's like, yeah, you know, I think you've probably got another one in you. And he's like, it's cool, man, it's cool. I know it was bad. I just wanted to see if you're a yes man.
Brilliant.
And it's to a certain degree, it's the M&Ms. Did you look at the contract? You know, the brown M&Ms. It's like, did you look at the Van Halen thing? It's like we need a glass of brown M&Ms in the green room. And the idea was that was in the contract where all their technical specification for the lighting and everything is.
Yeah.
So if you've read it, you go, we've got to put the brown M&Ms in. So they turn up very quickly and see, there's M&Ms here. They've read the contract.
Yeah.
We can do the show.
Yeah.
If there's not, it looks like they're being divas, but it's a quick and easy way for them to check. And it's to a certain degree, I say to people, it's like, try and do that. It's like if you're working with an engineer, and I turn up and I know this vocal mic sounds good. I'm like, is there any chance we can try a different mic or a different channel strip or something? And they're like, no, mate, this is the one. This is what it has to be. And you're like, so you're not prepared to try just now to try something relatively easy.
Yeah.
If you're not prepared to do that, the chances are you're not prepared to do other stuff.
Yeah,
so we will definitely log our heads at some point from
So
a creative
we'll just
so then you can just be like, cool, man, cheers.
Now. Yeah. No, I mean, you got to be flexible, you know, because again, you know, I'll just repeat it that my job as a sound engineer is to serve the band.
Yeah.
Right. It's not the band aren't there for me.
No, they didn't come.
The audience didn't come and see or listen to my work on the band. You know what I mean? I'm there, and if I've got an idea of what is gonna sound great or whatever, and the artist says to me, you know what? Can I just get a 58? I'll be like, yeah, sure. If that's what you want. That's what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
It's not as good as what we've got at the moment because I've given you the best. Like many times, you know, the DPA De Facto 2 vocal mics are fucking great, right? They're definitely my favorite vocal mic by far. So if I get somebody, especially female vocalists in, I'll give them that, and then they go like, whoa, hold on, what is this? Can I just get a 58? Like, you can do. Can we quickly try this, see if you're happy with it? If you're not happy with it, I've got a 58 right here in my hand.
Perfect.
Okay, let's just give it a go, because in my opinion, I think this would, complement your voice.
Yeah, exactly.
In this venue, just give it a go. And then if not, we try the 58, or we'll try another mic, whatever you want.
Yeah.
I'm happy to try anything, but please give this a go as well. And yeah, I mean, even if how many times I've set up a whole drum kit and the guy's like, can I try the 18-inch kick instead of the 20? I'm like, yeah, of course. You know, this is you. You got to be happy. You got to be comfortable on stage to do your job.
100%.
You know, because if there's any kind of animosity, if there's any kind of stress related that goes outside of the stress related to the performance, then it diminishes their capacity to focus on the performance.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, if you think about, say it's a 2-hour show and you convert those 2 hours into 120 points, a point for a minute, right? And if they got to spend 40 points worrying about, is the sound okay? Is this going to feedback? Is this? Then they've only got 80 points left. Well, if we go into percentage, let's say then they've only got 66% of their 100% available to concentrate on their performance, remembering the lyrics, whatever. Maybe they're trying a new song that they're nervous about. So as much of their time and bandwidth I can give, leave them with, so they can then focus on their performance. That means that I'm doing my job.
I think it's interesting because a lot of people, you get the two sort of sides of the artistry as well, because you've got like your kind of artists and then you've got your professional players.
Yeah.
And something that I've noticed with artists, they're very, very, very susceptible to minute changes, which is where we have to do our job really, really well. Like where you have to do exactly that.
Exactly,
because that's like you're cutting into my possibility of vibe, etc., and that has a massive detrimental effect on the overall performance. Whereas most professionals, it'll be like, oh, is that what you got to do? There's one guy who's I've worked with recently, is a drummer called Jerry Brown, and I've never seen him fazed by anything. It's hilarious. I'm like, what? And we did a shoot where we forgot the legs for the drums. So on the Vistalite kit with the big legs. And it's like, it'll be fine, we'll figure it out. So we just put some T-shirts, the kick drum's rocking.
Yeah.
Played it like, just amazing. I'm like, I don't understand what's happening here. How are you doing this?
Brilliant.
Because he's just like, it's obviously annoying and he would prefer it.
But he's a professional.
He's like, look, we'll make it happen. There's no point in me crying over it. What can we do? I'll just make it work. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
And you think that's, I mean, he's a blade, so to speak, in that sense. So you think, wow, I certainly wouldn't have that. I'd be like, oh no, and it would affect me. So if I don't have the sound from the guitar, I don't get the feedback, sort of kind of the force feedback correct. Yeah. It does have a knock-on effect to me. And that's why I would, especially early in the career of playing, I would use earplugs because I knew, worst case scenario, I've got the earplug in, I can hear the sound connection to the skull resonance, and that's what I'll pitch off. So whatever happens, it's cool. And it's like, that's a preparation for a poor engineer. Yeah. And when you get the great engineers, you're like, mate, you've made that, and of course it's exciting, and you're like, this was great. But you're right, it's kind of like venue dependent, people, etc. It's there's those crazy, because you just when you're a little bit sort of kind of the sort of kind of fear of what potentially can happen, you do have to sort of, I can't really move now because if I move, it's going to go nuts. Or is that me or what's happening?
I mean, I don't think I can stress enough that people do need to invest in taking an engineer with them. I mean, even 100%. if you're a band starting out and you've got a mate helping out, somebody that knows your music, that knows the set, that knows you, that gets on with you, that can be even a buffer between you and the venue, from an artist or musician point of view. It's so important because you've got another guy on board that's looking after the things that are out of your hands.
It's the funny thing. It's that idea of kind of them being creative and technical. It's like, so from when having toured with yourself, one of the things that I always thought was great about that, because we're both engineers, we both know, but whenever we were touring, I just didn't say anything. I'm like, it's in his hands, he's capable, I'll leave him to it. I know I'm in safe hands, because I'm like, it's got nothing to do with me. I might try and help you out I'll be like, T, what's the in-house guy's name? Okay, cool. I'll just go and get some DI boxes. I'll sort that out. You're like, wicked. All right, you've got that bit covered. I don't need to stress about that. You sort that. Yeah. I'll do this. But it takes so much, as a player on that side of the fence, it just takes so much stress out of the situation, knowing it's like you're just dealing with that. Yeah. You've got those guys covered. Yeah. That's happening, and it's going to be sound. Literally. We can just do our thing as a player and just be there kind of dealing with the nonsense that exists. Yes, what I'm saying is just
giving that bandwidth back for you to be able to do your job efficiently.
It's I think it's, but ultimately as well, if people sort of seem to forget that actually the main front of house, especially when you're talking live, and with live being such an integral part of the earning kind of machine now of music, 100%. It's like having that ability to consistently perform and deliver, because like you said, you're only as good as your last gig. So at the start, if you're a band and you turn up and you play well but it sounds bad, all of a sudden it's like that gig was bad in the eyes of the
punters,
the punter. And if you're thinking a lot of the stuff, we're working with an artist at the moment and they're literally going out doing these shows, and that's getting them an extra 20, 30 followers, sort of kind of people looking into the music, a few more playlists, plays on sort of Spotify, etc. So it's really important every time that they go that they deliver, because that fan base is growing because of that delivery.
Exactly.
And so when you're talking about that idea of going on a tours, doing your stuff, it's like everybody I know who's done that and taken on the mantle of responsibility for the tour managing point of view, to the booking agent, to everything. Yes, you're saving money, but is that money actually saved? And it's like when we were building this place, when we think about it, it's like, well, if we paid a building crew to do this, how much would they have charged? So is our time worth that? Yeah. And in the bigger picture, yes, it was, because we wouldn't have been able to achieve the results that we got for the cost. Yeah. As you said, this place came up in 2 months and they were just like boom, boom, boom. Imagine having to have done that yourself. Yeah, it's like if you're building a studio, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, oh yeah, we didn't think about that. But it's that idea of if you're acting as the sound engineer, but you're also trying to be the tour manager, and you're also trying to be the booking agent, and you're also so you're talking to the venue, trying to negotiate the ticket costing, merchandise, you're trying to get stuff for the band and get them comfortable in the green room and make sure everyone's happy, and you're trying to do the sound. It's like, is that amount of work that you're sacrificing worth your cost?
Now you have to split your bandwidth in five.
Exactly.
To put on 5 different hats.
And we try to sort of, in the studio specifically, it's like getting especially new people through is explaining all these different steps, like working our way down from like the mastering to the mixing to the production to the recording, all the way down these steps. So you sort of kind of get back to the sort of kind of source, and you go, look, if we kind of mess any of these steps up,
right at the top is going to be
there will be a kind of knock-on effect somewhere. And when somebody was asking me the best way to describe that whole function from like a whole studio perspective, the best way I can describe it is cooking. So if we said, right, we're going to cook, I don't know, let's say for example, chicken curry. So we're gonna cook a chicken curry. So we've decided on the meal concept, and that's like writing the song. So we have the song concept together. So we know what we want to cook.
Yeah.
So the next stage from there is we need to go and get the ingredients.
Yeah.
So we have to go to somewhere to get them. Now we have a choice, because depending on the quality of what we want to produce at the end, we have a choice. Do we go and settle for the corner shop? We just go, let's just get whatever we can find and we'll knock it together because we've got a small budget. Okay, so we do that. Then the cooking process is a little harder, which means, yes, we can. Then we go to the plating up stage, etc. It works, but there's flaws because there was something flawed initially. Essentially, our budget flawed us. Yeah. But if we had a big budget, we could go to a really good butcher, we could go to really good grocers, we could go and get all these different things, these amazing herbs and stuff. And then all of a sudden, the cooking process, which in my head is like the mixing process. So the ingredients are like the recording.
That's right. Yeah.
Going to the good studio, recording it nicely, taking your time. We then mix it, cook it. It's easier when you mix a record that's been done, and I'm lucky recorded, here. I did some mixing recently for somebody who'd done all the tracking themselves. And I was like, wow, I'm having to really try to get things to happen here, to get it to the standard that I'm used to. Whereas the stuff that I've got from here or some other studios where they've really thought about the sonics, it's like, oh, it's just so much easier. It's like it's almost cooking itself. But we can still mess it up. But then finally, plate up. If we then go and get some nice plates, and exactly, it's the mastering stage.
Rectangular plates. And
all of a sudden, you've got something that looks exactly, and it looks amazing. It tastes amazing. So everything about it creates something amazing, and that's like really like a special record.
Yeah. Now you just need someone to wipe your forehead as you're sweating this curry down.
Exactly. Well, knowing you, it'd be 1 million Scoville units plus.
Oh man, you remember that curry I had in New York?
I was telling somebody about it the other day.
My lord.
The bricklayer, the hottest curry in the world. You putting salt on it going, this is shit, bro. That was funny. That was hot.
It was hot.
I had a little dab and it was crying. My God.
But it was good. It was a good time. I got through it. I got through it. I think I proved myself to myself.
Yeah, exactly. But it's kind of when we think about the same thing from the live perspective, if we've rehearsed well, we know our stage setup, we understand how we're going to set things up in the monitoring stages. And that's why when I was doing the touring with you, I'd got my own kind of monitoring setup to a certain extent, because the setup was so complicated that to just stress any poor engineer out with that is wasted. It's like, look, I'll just get vocal back, please, and some of the other guys, and I'm cool. And so I'll take
monitor myself.
I'll take a lot of that responsibility on myself, because I know this is going to be hard work for anybody to sort.
You also don't know which venue you're going to end up in, what the specs are.
Stage sizes change, you know.
Quality of monitors change. The amount of outputs that a disc has changes, and then sometimes you got to compromise. Am I going to have to share with the drummer? Am I going to have to share with
And especially when you jump in
guitarist or a vocalist, and they want this and you want this.
But even venue to venue festivals, so you go into a normal house venue to a festival venue.
And you've got an open air gig, and it's
So there's so many factors, and it's like, so if you, think about it, it's the same from our point of view in the studio with production. It's like, do your pre-production, do your homework. It's like, understand the song so you know what you're kind of looking for. Demo it. It's one of the big things that I always find in studio recording and stuff is people think that the engineer can work wonders to create anything. And you're like, look, if I take a picture of two people, I can't easily make that picture look like a million people without it looking a bit weird.
Yeah, without it looking like I've
copied and pasted two people a lot. Because
500,000 times.
It's like, it just looks a bit... I mean, of course, you can do it, but of course, there's going to be in your eye, it's going to look a bit odd because everyone's in the same direction and looking the same. Yeah. So it is possible. Like, everything is possible, but whether or not it's sonically convincing is the different factor.
Also, whether it's worth, you know, all that extra time.
But then that comes back to exactly that idea: is it worth us wasting, essentially, or not wasting even, but if I can record a great drum track in half a day, is that better than me then spending 2 days editing and triggering a poor performance of drums?
I had that exact same thing happen. I recorded an album and mixed it for a friend of mine over the summer last year. And because it was a student project, so obviously the budget was non-existent. And she'd been let down various times by musicians, and they'd rehearse, and whenever it comes time, and then this one can't do that, and then this one just leaves, and just weird things. Anyway, so we got to the point where school was out and everybody had gone home. You know, so the one guy was in Greece, and the other one was in France, and the other one was up in the north, and you know, and you know, she was in Estonia. So it was like so I did a remote recording, if you will, even, you know. But when I went to Finland with Simande for the Pori Jazz Festival, and I'd gotten all these tracks, the drum tracks, for a 15-song album, right, that had now been recorded by the drummer and his producer friend, right, and it was shambles. It took me 4 hours to try and sift through the shit that was track number one, right? And it wasn't recorded in a linear fashion. It was takes, but they were underneath each other. They weren't labeled. It was, and I had different backing tracks in the same session for like track 1, 5, 7, 12, and 13. Some drum parts again, and it took me so long to try and just arrange these things in a way that was any way intelligible before I even started pasting, before I even started cutting out. It was, and I'm like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna rent a rehearsal studio, right, for the day, and we'll fucking record it in there. Yeah. And already a million times better.
100%.
Immediately, because I recorded it myself, I labeled everything as I was going. Whenever we stopped between takes, when it goes from a verse to a chorus or whatever, I kept it on the same fucking track. I didn't start new tracks underneath what was going, so I then have to move things into place, because you've got a metronome, you're working. Come on, man. I mean, these things should have really been sorted out.
A lot of this is a good example of the pre-production side of things. Yeah. Because one of the things that we started, what I try to encourage people to do, and again, when you look at, I think a lot of people sort of assume that, and this is a question we get asked a lot, it's what's your day rate? Yeah. And the simple answer is you can't afford the day rate. It's that simple. Because unless you're a major label or you've got a lot of money, it's a lot of money to throw. But we're not charging a day rate. Because when you're talking about something that's going to be 20 days, we'll do a deal.
Let's remortgage your house, mate.
Yeah, it's like there's a deal to be made. You can broker a deal, because that goes back to, it doesn't matter about the money. We're just trying to think about, what's the project? Do we like what you're doing? Yeah, we can help you, or whatever. And it's kind of, I was doing some stuff where we've been trying to set up a clear line for a client as to why. So we've gone from the writing process, where I've written some tracks, played the guitar, just a bit of vocal, simple demo. And then we got Elliot Henshaw to play drums. So Chris on bass, Elliot on drums, and then myself on guitar. So then we sat and did a demo day. So rough miking up,
Yeah.
talk through the tracks, get some ideas, we play some ideas down, and record a rough demo so everybody's on the same page. That way, we now know the structure, we know the format, we know the form, we know the sounds. I could then add all the other parts that I thought would, to a demo perspective, relevant.
Yeah.
So now everybody goes, you know what, actually that snare's not right, or maybe that pattern isn't correct.
Yeah, you've got an actual audible version of your idea.
And we can all agree, okay, so when we listen back to the recording stage, we go to do the actual proper takes, then we can sit there and we can go, right, is that snare sound right? Do we need something a bit fatter? Because with that vocal line, that's kind of getting in the way now. Or is this guitar part necessary? Do we want to... I like that thing. And even then, when we were doing stuff, I'm like, oh, you know what you did on the demo was cool. Can we just do something like that? Play the demo back. We've got a reference.
Yeah.
When you're doing the remote, and this is, again, a failing that I did when I did an album a few years ago, is that we had some demos, but we hadn't band demoed it. And so we went in and tracked drums on their own. Later on, then added guitars and bass, and sort of over the course of a few months, tracked everything. And at the end of it, although it sounds great, the drummer was saying, I wouldn't have played that. Now I know what it sounds like. I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, it's a shame because we don't really have the ability to go back and do it again because of budget, because of restriction.
Yeah.
When you have a space like this where we're able to get in and do that, you can actually sort of, and that makes everything so much easier. Because I am so not a fan of sifting through takes. I'm like, nope.
Oh man, it's excruciating.
But it's getting people to understand, I think, that process as well. Because from if you're producing the record, if that's what your job is here, it's like, okay, my job is to gather all the information, present it cohesively, so it comes across as a good representation of what the artist wanted it to be. Because the artist isn't necessarily producing, they're writing, and the producer's guidance is helping them to realise. So they'll take them to places that they didn't think they'd go. Yeah. And it doesn't mean they have to engineer. They can literally just be almost like a muse. Yeah. It's like, I'm helping you to make it. So let's think about these guitars, and we'll try and get this thread in the EP so it sounds like it's all supposed to be together. Yeah, man. Some artists are very good at that, and they have that. Some engineers are very good at that. But the job of the engineer is to then sort of kind of capture what that person's trying to achieve
the idea
in the best possible way.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is when you have an artist who's producing an engineering, or the engineering, I don't know what the production angle is. It's like, I don't know what I'm looking for. That's like trying to cook a meal. You don't know what you're cooking. Yeah. Go to the shops and buy stuff.
Just start doing something.
Go and get some herbs.
Yeah.
Okay, what we're cooking? Just go get some herbs.
Just get something, and then we'll figure it out.
Spicy. Yeah, exactly. And of course, the problem with this is the sort of kind of hit to miss ratio is usually higher on the miss.
Oh, 100%.
And you will hit it sometimes, and those hits are great because all the things fell into place. Yeah. And I always find that it's that sort of process for me is where the failings exist. So when I listen to some stuff, people are coming, they're like, oh, can you help me fix this? Or can you finish this? We listen to it, and it's like, oh, you know what? You just don't really have any kind of clear direction. So it's difficult because then you're not really...
Started strong, and then you kind of just got lost in the middle there.
Yeah, you had a great idea. You know you wanted to go somewhere, but we just don't really know where that destination is. I've packed, I'm ready to go, but I just don't know where I'm going. Yeah,
and it's not like we're just going to get on the M25 and go around and around.
You can.
We decide whether we go north or south.
We're stopping off at Kent.
There's a service just down the road. We'll reconvene there.
And it's a lot of this, and they're all the worlds are the same, because if you take those mentalities from a band perspective, musician perspective, artistry, whatever, if you know what the stage sound is you want, that helps. Because if I turn up and go, mate, you know what, right? We want this, which we want like proper aggression, like big drum sound, and you're like, okay, yeah, I know what page you're on. Yeah. So you know where to focus. Whereas if I'm like, mate, it's like the drums have got to sound distant and a bit like kind of like almost like they're percussive. You'd be like, okay, so it's not going to be like, you know, Pantera style kicks.
Heavy metal here.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's and what happens, I think, when you're left in a position, and I've had that where I'm kind of like given stuff and I'm like, I don't really know.
You're left guessing
what you want, so I'm left to then just do what I think is right. And then it comes back to the artist going, no, that's not what I wanted. And you're like, well, you didn't tell me what you wanted. So
I went with my gut.
And even when I asked you, you didn't know. So then it's kind of like, that's the problem, I think. And it's
the communication. And I think that brings me back to, I think, just the super importance of, man, I mean, it'll take 5 minutes, just from musicians and from engineers, for everybody, just to be like, this is how you communicate with each other. If you want to be effective in doing your job, right, and if you want to make this job as easy as you can for yourself and for everybody else, this is the way that we should communicate with each other. This is the way that we should be able to bear in mind that this person who's you as a musician, bear in mind that the engineer can make or break your gig, regardless of how well you play, how 100%. Well you're rehearsed, how good the material is, and then, the other way around. You can be a great engineer, but you get an artist that slightly makes you nervous, or they talk to you in a way that, makes you unable to perform to your best. Then it really degrades the experience. So I really think that that's just something that people need to be aware of.
I think the big thing is, and it's something that we tend to do quite a lot anyway, and this is more in, I think it's a personality trait as well. That's why some engineers are more successful than others, etc. But
you're trying to say something. This is why I'm still stuck. Are you calling me a cunt?
Basically, Terence.
What it is.
This is what I'm going to draw out what your problems are. But because what we have is the ability to take on board, and there's a bit of to-ing and fro-in, a bit of give and take. Because whenever I'm on a live situation, I will leave it into the hands of whoever's doing the sound, and I'll ask for what I want, and if I get what I want, I'm really happy.
That's it.
And it's like, but I'll have a compromise point. I'm like, what do I really want is this. Where's the limitation of where I go?
Where can I absolutely not do this?
If I sort of kind of go, we've got to where I can get to a point where I'm pretty happy. It's not here. It's not the best. But you know what? It's good enough. I'm like, that's totally cool. I won't say, look, mate, it's not what I want, but you're doing enough of a job for me to not be too super pissed at you. No, you're like, mate, that's perfect. Absolutely bang on. That's cool. You're like, cool. He's happy. Move on.
Yeah.
So the thing is, it's like, it's not perfect for me, but it's the compromise. It's a middle ground that, because I might be like, you're going, dude, you can't. You're in the corner. The microphone's reflecting off the walls. There's literally nothing we can do.
Unless and you're at the limit of what my monitors are able to give you.
And I know that, so I can be like, look, man, that's cool. Whatever you can do is great. That's cool. In fact, if you need to, take this out of there then. Lose that, because that compromise, I can lose the kick drum to get more vocal or something, or less tom or whatever. And that's that compromise. So you're trying to compromise to the limit of where it can go. Whereas I've and it's again same from the studio perspective. I'll get people who insist I have to use this snare or I have to use this kick, and I'm like, why? Why do you have to use that? Oh, it's because it's what I play, and I'm like, okay.
But are you able to hear the difference in the sound that this one and that
but
one
is it but it's almost to a point. It's like, is it relevant to the song, or is it just because you like it? Like, so there's a difference between you and this is definitely from this is a whole musical perspective in its own right. But if you're part of that whole team presenting the music, if I want to use something because I personally like it, but it doesn't really suit the music that's going on, then I'm selfishly performing for my own gain. It's like we all do. Everybody who's a musician is essentially a little bit narcissistic. Because it's that ego-driven sort of kind of, no disrespect to musicians, but that's why I started. I was like, I want to be a band player so people think I'm cool. Didn't really work, but it's like, it is what it is. But we all have that sort of kind of degree of like, I want to do it because I enjoy it. I like it. It's something that makes me feel good. You don't go up and play music because I hate it and it really drives, but I really like helping out the singer. That makes me feel good inside when the singer feels happy. It's like nobody does an artistry because of that
unless
reason.
it's balls deep in the singer.
Yeah.
And then they have to.
But then there's a payoff. So
no, there's going to be a reward at some stage.
So, but I think it's, if you think of it in that point, it's like the guitar choice or the amplifier volume, or it's like, I have to have this because this is how loud my amp is to play. Now, of course, there's a compromise from the engineering perspective.
That's mixing with your eyes.
Yeah, but we try to an extent go, okay, can we make that work? Because I want you to be comfortable. But equally, from the artist's point of view, it's like, is what I'm doing making everything really difficult for everybody?
No, yeah,
and
or
that's
is
when
it really necessary?
Yeah, but this is when we have the artist versus the professional.
Yeah.
The professional will just go, no problem, I'll turn down.
Yeah.
Cool, no worries, because they will compromise immediately. Most of the artists will then just go,
I can't
I
really
have
work
to do
like
this.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, it's like sometimes you'll find the artists are very professional, and they're just like, yep, cool, I'll sort it out. And it's like the band, who are not the artists, act like an artist. And act like, it's like, this is my thing. It's like, I can't understand how you're trying to stifle my creativity by changing the snare, or, you're like, man, it's just going to make things sound better. I'm not here to make your life harder.
Yeah, I'm not here to ruin your record. Let's just get that straight.
Yeah, so I didn't think, what would be great is if I can get these guys in, make it sound like a bag of shit, and then send you on your merry way.
Money for it,
because people are definitely going to come and listen to this record, It's like,
it's funny, isn't it?
Because I think, again, a lot of people seem to misinterpret. It's like, if an engineer is helping to do something, you brought that engineer on board. It's either because you thought, I love what they do. And this happens when you get certain credibility, because then all of a sudden it's like, I love that record you did, and blah, blah, blah. Of course, the band were massively instrumental in that. A mic is a mic. As we were talking, it's like a mic's a mic, a room is a room to an extent. So if I put Steve Gadd in that room, and I put me playing drums in that room, well, Steve's going to sound better. The same mic, same room. He's a great drummer. So they'll definitely make something, irrespective of the engineer to an extent. Yes, the engineer has a massive, like we said, it's the experience factor, the problem solving, the ability to sort of kind of work with the artist, the give and take, etc. Which makes that engineer great. But what I tend to sort of kind of come up against a lot is people sort of going, the engineer has nothing to do with what's happening here. The mix engineer has nothing to do with this. The producer, nothing. I'm the artist is me. This is my music. You have to do every little nuance that I think it needs to have to like actually portray this track correctly. And it's a little bit because they've got in your mindset how you hear the track in your head.
Yeah.
But
they're also they're married to that idea,
Yeah, and I think that you see this with especially like inexperienced artists, that they'll try really hard to get that idea to completely translate, and it's that understanding that it will never translate. If you're super lucky and you find a bunch of musicians and an engineer and producer, etc., who all seem to actually almost have the same mindset as you, then you probably will be able to get almost everything that's in your head out.
Yeah.
But they'll probably be similar personalities to you, so then you'll hate each other.
Yeah.
And that's why you see all these great bands, they all kind of hate each other, because they've got similar sort of traits that just kind of constantly hit, but they're on the same wavelength musically.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, and as, again, an engineer's point of view, it's my job in that position to listen to them and say, what is it you want? Okay, you want it to sound like this. Well, this is probably the best way we can achieve that. And if they're not prepared to switch and go, but no, I have to have this kick drum, I have to have an 18-inch kick, but I want it to sound like Bonham.
Yeah. I'm
like, well, we can't do that with an 18. We can try, but it's never going to quite sound the same.
Yeah.
If we can jump on this 22 or 24, then we'll definitely get that.
Yeah, with no problem.
We can do stuff. And again, as an experienced engineer, I can say there are things we can do. I can reamp it, I can do some playing, I can mess around, and I could make it work. But you're adding hours of nonsense on to something. If we just compromise for 2 seconds, we'll get that sound for you.
This will take us 5 minutes to swap it around.
And this is why I think in our job, once we've got that sort of kind of give and take with an artist, they latch onto you and just like, do not ever leave. They're like, that's my engineer, that's the guy. Because as soon as you've done a band and they're like, man, that was great, you're like, you're coming with us. Because they know it's like, that's it, we've got you.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing, because as an engineer, it's like when you do your job really right and everything's kind of working, people do respect that. But it takes a little bit, that initial, no engineer I've ever come across has ever been given that sort of kind of respect. Like, people respect the position and go, I know your job's hard, I know this, but I have to hear your work to then go, I know your job's hard and you did a fucking amazing job. So you are a badass. Same with me. It's like, people, it doesn't matter how many things you've done, they still have to come in, they have to meet you, they have to try, they have to let it happen, and then they go, oh, this is great, why didn't you tell me this? It's like, I've told you this. But you won't obviously listen to me, because it's a little bit like saying, I'm great, come and hang around with me. Yeah,
unfortunately, there's a lot of cowboys out there as well.
100%.
Who, they pass themselves off as, just as an example, again, this producer that was recording the drums, that, for me personally, I think the term producer is reserved for the top. The guys who have been there. Then they can take a good album and make it great. They can take a good song and make it great. They can just give you another way of looking at it.
Yeah.
So you're like, right. Because they've got the experience. They've got it's a talent as well, to
100%.
To be able to take something and say, listen, I like what you did here, but maybe let's do verse 1 and verse 2 before the chorus instead of verse, chorus, verse, chorus. Just give it a go, right? And then you repeat verse 1 at the end, sort of thing.
For me, that's the sort of that's the traditional, I think, real producer, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We have, there's a big thing now in the modern sort of kind of take of things where we get the beat maker producers. There's nothing wrong with these guys. They're brilliant.
You're talking about these are the guys that I'm talking about. Like, I don't know whether that title is really reserved for you.
It's vague. It's because
the Ableton Live guys,
Yeah, but it's like, from my point of view, it's kind of a beat maker. Again, musically, it depends on the style of music you're working within. Like, beat makers won't necessarily translate to sort of kind of a rock or indie format. Equally the same, somebody who's very used to producing that sort of style of music will struggle going across to things like hip hop or grime or something like this, because you just can't, but that again comes down to compromise and working with, because if you're able to do that, like, I work in hip hop, I do that sort of stuff. I've mixed, we've got a hip hop guy, Chris has got signed to his label, and he's great. And previous to that, hadn't really done any hip hop, so it took a moment to go, okay, how do we do this properly and get it to work? And it's, from my point, engineering is engineering.
Yeah,
it's like, because somebody asked me recently, it's like, oh, do you mix like folk stuff then, or can you mix this or that? And I'm like, well, yeah,
I know how the desk works, so yes.
It's okay. Stylistically, there are certain approaches that you'd want to maybe implement 100%. More, but really, that takes a few reference tracks for you to listen, compromise your thought process, and just do the same sort of thing.
Yeah, that's it.
EQ is EQ.
That's right.
It's not a rock EQ.
No. Yeah, no, it doesn't exist.
Use that pull tech. That's only for pop and rock. When you're doing country, you must use the manly.
That's right.
That's completely insane. And that's why it's that whole idea is, what are your vocal mics? It's like, well, I've got mics.
Yeah.
These ones are good for vocal, and they do really help with that. But I've mic'd up drums with this.
Oh, man.
It's like, it's designed for the purpose we're doing it now.
Yeah.
That's its function.
Yeah. But on a sax, amazing.
Amazing
guitar
mics.
amp, amazing.
Yeah.
I learned from Daniele Di Giovanni, fantastic engineer. He does a lot of Lee Ritenour's stuff, and Lee's got 2 Fender Twins at a sort of like a 130 degree angle, right? And so Daniele puts 2 257s on the outside cones, and then he takes a SM7 about a foot back in the middle of the amp, just to let it breathe, and he blends those together. It just sounds like,
you got a nice stereo image with a bit of depth.
My God.
Yeah.
And he just, cuts the high end off of this, just get the low end on it.
Yeah.
But
that's, do you know what I mean? It's like when you're sort of kind of in those points of view, we're engineers, and when we mix, we're engineers. We're musicians. We play. We have our music that we like to listen to. But when we're doing that job with that, we don't interfere with each other's jobs. So when you're playing, you're a player. When you're mixing, you're a mix engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, from my point, with that production idea, it's the guys who and this is why, again, with the guy who's got this studio, Chris, who's basically this is his space. As a producer, whenever I watch him and work with him doing it, that's exactly his thought process. But he goes even further in that sense of, he's like, what's the song about? What's the emotion to it? Mm-hmm. And he tries to even coax that out of you. And then sometimes it's like, yeah, that particular part that you're insisting on is crucial because it really does convey the sentiment of the song.
So he's like the artist whisperer.
Yeah, a little bit. So it's pulling it out. It might be like, I just need to piss you off, and then when you're angry, you get the right emotion for what you need. Or it might be that I need you to unload your emotional baggage a bit.
Right.
But it's all about that. But when you're in that mindset, because you're in a creative space, you don't want to be thinking logically. You know, if you're in an emotional space, you're not thinking about the toaster. You're not thinking about how long's left on the pizza in the oven. You're just thinking about the emotion. And equally, when you're trying to do something technical, you're not thinking about emotional content. Hence, when you're saying, you know, you're there to serve the band, because they're in the artistry where they're thinking creatively. So they don't care what frequency's feeding back. It's not relevant to them.
Just don't make it feed back.
Yeah, so just make me comfortable, please. Whereas for us, I don't care necessarily what you're feeling about the song. I just want you to stop waving the mic at the monitor.
Yeah. If you do that, it's going to feed back.
I just want you to please try and do something that's not going to make my job hard.
Mate, I had that about 2 months ago. Soul singer, quite reputable soul singer from the 70s and 80s, and doesn't turn up for a sound check. You know, the band was there, they did their thing, but they just told me he wants loads of reverb in his monitors, and he wants it really loud because he's old and deaf.
Right.
Okay. And he had this tendency to have the mic in his hand and dance, and then he would do that the whole time. Like, he never stopped doing that. You understand? You kind of think maybe you realize after a while that that's not the thing to do. If you've already got your monitors at +5, right, and I'm driving reverb that it sounds like the ocean on stage, you know, it's and then doing that constantly and then looking at me, why is it feeding back? Well, you know, clearly you don't understand the restrictions. And whenever I turn it down, you tell me over the mic in a full house, turn my mic up in my monitor, sound guy.
Hey, sound guy.
Yeah, that's why I called this Hey, sound guy. Because we love being called that. I mean, that's what we do, but, you know.
But that comes back to that sort of adage or the idea of the compromise, because that's an artist going, look, do you know who I am? I'm an artist. It's like, I'm here to entertain. I'm here to do my job. You're making me not be able to do my job. And you're like, I'm not trying to do that. It's not. I'm not purposely putting feedback into your monitor to try and piss you off.
Yeah, I came here today to ruin you.
Yeah, it's like, I thought, do you know what would be a good crack?
Yeah.
No, of course
not. Make things hard for everyone.
So it's like, that's how I roll.
Yeah. So I just like to be miserable all day. In fact, I wake up in the morning and I cut myself just a little bit, just to draw some blood.
You know, just to feel it. But it's and I just find that those are the people in any situation, irrespective of what guidance you can create, will always blame something else.
Yeah.
So it's never them. It's never their fault. So if the record doesn't sound good, that's not because they didn't listen to the advice of the people around them. It's like, oh, it doesn't do well or something. It's like, look, and I was saying this to the assistant here. I was like, look, you've got to remember, it's our job as the engineer and as the mix engineer. Our job here is to capture everything and make it the best it can be.
A true representation of what was being.
Our job is to make records, make music. That's what our job is. It's not to sell it. Our job isn't selling it. That's when it's done. So the producer has this sort of slight quandary between potentially making something that's sellable to something that is just an artistry point of view. So you can turn around and go, I really couldn't give a shit if it charts. I don't really care if I'm just going to make some music that I think sounds great. And if everybody likes it, great.
Yeah.
And that's that. And you make the music, you take a punt, and you do your thing. There are the sort of kind of then let's say the sort of style of beat making where it's like I'm trying to make something that's commercially viable. So I'm adhering to a specific set of kind of
by numbers,
almost to an extent. And if you look at a lot of maybe especially sort of kind of the writing to commission and stuff like this, it's like, oh, we're trying to actually pitch music for a very particular job, so I'm trying to get it to these pop artists, we're trying to do that. You are having to kind of stick things to a certain format, because if we deviate from format, it's a gamble. And all music is a gamble, because it's like whether or not it's successful or not, we don't know. So even you could have lots of success and still never really know. And that's what makes this kind of a little bit entertaining in my head, that in that catch-22 sort of situation, is if you happened to have been a front of house engineer for a major artist, and then you went and got a job somewhere else, and you said, oh, I was front of house for Sting for 10 years, I'd be like, wow, you must be really good at your job. It's like, well, you'd be the same. It's just that you happen to be there. So just because you've done that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be then taking the band from Bognor Regis through to Wembley. Because it's like, yeah, if I get behind the sound desk, magic happens. To a certain extent it does, but it's not. It's like it's only a small factor to it. And you're the pinch of salt at the end of the meal, mate. Yeah.
You know, if the band are good and they perform well and the music's good, end of the day, that meal's cooked. You just add salt to taste.
Exactly,
right?
and that comes back to that combination of all the elements. So from our job, it's like the experience factor is what makes it work. It's not how many successes you might have had. Because you can have a very experienced engineer who's not had any sort of major success, but make you sound phenomenal. And it's like, you think, how have you not had success? It's like, how many musicians do you sometimes see, like small local festivals or in pubs, and you're like, what? How good are you? And you think, how come I've never heard of this person? And it's because they just didn't hit it the right moment at the right time.
So many stars have to align, man. You know,
and that's the thing. And it's so the real thing that all we can do is just, again, compromise, have that ability to sort of kind of push when we think it's needed.
Yeah.
Because it's a really fine line, because there is no sort of right or wrong, because it's such a personality thing.
It is, man. It really is. And it, you know, I've had this once where it kind of made me realize, because of my personality I have a really hard time selling myself. Or pushing. If a band wants to take me with them, if they approach me like, listen, we like what you're doing, would you like to join the team? I'm 100%. You know, obviously if I enjoy the music, I'm not going to do something that I don't want to do. But I've had where I've done a good job for this band, and I really like the band, but my colleague started chatting with them because he had a little bit more time, and he ended up going away with them on tour. And I was a bit like, you know, that really sucks. But end of the day, it's like you say, it's about personality and just how well you get on. There's a degree of professional etiquette there, which I think is lost a little bit. If you talk a lot to more of the sort of old guard musicians that are around, so the people who were sessioning 15, 20, 30 years ago, their mentality on professional standards and etiquette tend to be honourable to a certain degree. It's like, if I was talking to the band, from my point of view, even if the money's there, I wouldn't take the gig, because it's not really my gig to take. That's opportunism to a certain degree on the strength of somebody else's sort of kind of work. I mean, and that's what I find. This is like, if I mean, we'll finish stuff and do things. So if you've, and this happens a lot, and it's kind of the fine line is, if, for that example, if you went on tour with them and they were like, we like what T does, but we just didn't quite click with him. You work with T, would you be up for coming on the next tour
because we seem to get on with you better. That's cool, because you're like, look, you had your chance, you had a pop, it didn't quite work out. Fine.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to clarify, this was in a venue where I work. It's not a gig that I lost because my colleague was... Yeah, but I know exactly what you mean.
It's that sort of kind of mentality. And it's like same thing from my point of view. If I'd done something and then somebody working with me or was within the sort of vicinity of that environment then poached something, I wouldn't be overly upset about it, but I would still be a bit like, you've kind of like drawn the line in the sand there, you've shown your cards, and that's fine. If you're that person, I know musicians like that, good friends of mine actually who are musicians who will literally drop you at a hat when the gig's better, and I'm like, that's cool, because I know that, I understand that, and that's fine. It's not personal, that's a business thing, that's a business decision you've made. It's totally cool. There are other people that I know would never, irrespective, they take the job. If they took the job for 50 quid and somebody offered them £1,000 for another job, they'd do the 50 quid job.
Yeah, I'm like that.
And you know, from a business point of view, it's kind of crazy because you're actually detrimental to your business. But from a professional aspect, it's what's going to make the difference.
You've got integrity.
Yeah, and it's like literally, it goes back to the fact that you'll do the job to the nth degree because you said you'd do it. Yeah. And if you said, and I've like,
also I know just for the pleasure of the job, because I fucking love my job.
Yeah, but that professionalism will always shine through. I've known people go through like ridiculous sort of kind of personal arse-ache to do the job because they said they'd do it. And it's like they've missed out on cool things. They've had a really couple of shitty days to do the job. They've done it, come back, and they're like, you know what? It will pay forward, because I work with these people a lot. And it did, you know, because they stopped doing the job that they were doing that was more profitable, and they needed work again. These people are like, well, you have always looked after us, so we've still got that communication. And so
rapport there.
Yeah, but this is with more my job, I suppose, because I can work it around time frame. So from a live point of view, it's similar sort of as the player. It's like you've got to be at the gig.
Yeah.
The difference is, it's like you can jump from one gig to another gig. You could do a funk gig and very easily jump to a metal gig the next day, in the same day even, without any preparation. I can say, T, can you come and do this tomorrow? Yep, and you're there. Yeah. Because you know it's a desk. It's mics.
That's it.
Experience wins through. As a player, that's a lot harder, because I might have to learn certain songs. I might have to try and stylistically change.
Swapping styles is not just...
So you're more governed by kind of the team sort of thing as a player. But in the studio, even more so, because I can then say, yes, I can do the project in this month.
It's going to take this much time.
So I can take on X amount of projects and then just dictate time and fill it in wherever I can, really. So it means that I can then be a lot more flexible necessarily with the time management, which... when you're working on a particular night, so I've got to be there Friday 7. I can't not be there Friday at 7.
Yeah, because in the gig's
not sound check, man. Yeah. Whereas for me, it's like I'd like to be here to do this at 3 o'clock this afternoon, but if I come tomorrow at 4, it's cool.
Yeah.
Or I could do it earlier or later. Do you want to use it? That's fine. It's whatever.
Work through the night or whatever.
There's always a way around, and it's kind of so there's that. That's quite nice about the studio environment thing. But I think there's that sort of kind of idea of trying to take on the gig and, again, thinking about the money more than you're thinking about the job. That's you trying to monetize what you're doing.
Yeah.
And, of course, everyone has their own motivation for what they're doing. But I sometimes find the monetization stops the musicality.
Yeah.
So then you're just like, come in, do your job, pay me, get out. I don't,
by numbers,
you know, yeah. And I found there's a couple of engineers that I've known of, younger guys, who are very stubborn with their approach to what they're doing, and as a result, the people, like I knew a producer he's mainly a sort of kind of a writer, but again, producer in that sense of he works with bands, does a lot of very good musical stuff. Went to a studio, and the engineer was just flat out refusing to change how he was miking something up, irrespective of what the producer was asking for. He's like, I want it to sound tight, dry. It's a horn section. I want it to be tight, dry, close, punchy. So he's got mics at distance, far away, roomy as hell. And he's like, that's not really what I want.
For. I need something punchy.
He's like, that's how I record the horns. That's how I record them. It's like, right, okay. So you're not able to compromise at all. It's like, essentially, as the engineer, and if it's in a studio position, if I have an outside person coming in to this environment, which we don't tend to do because, again, it's me and Chris working as a team.
Yeah.
But if we have an outside person, my job is to serve that person.
Yeah.
I'm here to 100% facilitate your idea.
Absolutely.
If you want to mic up that kick drum with
Mate,
a tea bag,
if you want us to glue the drums to the roof and strap you in, let's do that, Tommy Lee. You know.
And that's it. And it's like, so if we're doing something, I'm like, are you happy with what you're getting? Is this have I interpreted your intention correctly? And if you say yes, excellent.
Yeah, you've
press
done
record.
Your job right. Yep,
Let's record this and get the takes.
Yep.
You know, whereas if you're not happy, then what can we do to make you happy?
Yeah.
And
or on the other hand, you know, I'm not happy till you're not happy.
Yeah. and it's funny. It's like a lot of people, the placebo effect of the desk is quite interesting. So people will listen to stuff, go, oh man, you can hear the desk, and we've not used it.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah.
We had one.
That's where the old DFA comes into play as well.
We had one very unfortunate person come through. Lovely guy. I won't mention who. But the desk power supplies had actually broken.
So it wasn't even switched on?
It wasn't even on, yeah.
Right.
And he was like, man, you can hear the desk, can't you? And it's like, it's like plugged straight.
Bro.
It's literally plugged straight into the speakers.
Yeah, sure, bro. It's
But that's that sort of placebo thing. And it's like when you look at any of the major studios, people have this thing where they go, oh, I'm mixing it at Abbey Road, or I'm mixing at Metropolis, or Britannia Row, any of these things. It's like, look, they're fantastic studios, but most of it.
Are you paying for the name?
No, to a certain extent, yes and no. I think you're paying for the.
No, I mean for the engineer.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I'm mixing here
because a lot of the in-house
there's more
guys
prestige attached to it.
Because a lot of the in-house guys will be previous assistants and so on, and they're going to be fucking great, and they are great. But most of the records that you're hearing weren't necessarily done by those guys.
By them, yeah.
It will be externals booking that space, and like having been into Abbey Road and done stuff, what I found was. The environment placebo effect, so to speak, was what made it special. It's like knowing in Studio 2, you're sitting in there like, oh, this is Studio 2. Yeah. This is cool. And you're doing stuff. I wasn't a massive fan of the control room. I thought, yeah, this is all right. Not a massive fan of that console. So
but there's an atmosphere, and there's
and it's phenomenal, and that's kind of the thing. And it's like with something like the desk, it's that idea. So if I had an audience in here, which are great desks, if there was an audience sat here, not me personally had it in here, but if there was an audience in here, would it have the same effect on people?
Probably not.
And I think, and it's interesting where you see that with...
Well, I suppose that it kind of... Yes and no. It depends on who you're talking about. If you've got an engineer coming in that kind of knows what he's doing, he'd be like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's a desk. It's cool.
It's beautiful. It's got a history.
Yeah.
And it's all lovely, but whatever. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
And then you get somebody who doesn't really know, and they're like, ooh, I'll only work on that, or I'll...
And that's almost like the romance of the situation. And that's... So what we've done here and how we've done this space is to build and almost play on that. It's like we want you to...
Great vibe in here, man.
But that's the idea, is to almost sort of kind of like fall in love with the space. And it's like, then
you can almost feel the history even though there is none.
Yeah, exactly. That's just old socks.
Yeah, I thought there was a bit of a funky smell in here. Right, you leave them in the corner, right, just to...
Keep the history vibe. Yeah,
fantastic,
100%.
Right, fantastic, yeah.
And it's quite... And it's a nice sort of kind of thing to have that. And of course, you can take it for granted having access to something like this and saying, well, you don't need it. But bizarrely, having it's shown me how important it is, and in the same breath, it's not.
You can get the job done without it, but it's so much nicer with it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the desk, please.
Okay, so let's see if I can get the numbers right. It was installed...
64 channels. There you go. That's all you need.
Well, it was it's a 56.
48.
It's a 56 shell with another 16 in the patch bass section. So this over here would have been the stereos.
Right.
It was originally installed in Olympic Studios in 1983, I believe, in Studio One.
Right. So it's as old as I am.
Yeah. In fact, here's a beautiful picture of Prince on that bit of the desk.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is kind of cool.
Is that why it's so sticky over there, Hugh? Right.
So,
moving on.
But it went to another studio. I forget the name. For a smaller period, when they moved it out of Olympic, and then it was bought up by a chap called Mark. I forget his surname. Chris knows all the details of that. Who basically then recaps, resorts, and so forth. And Chris had contacted him looking for a console with history. Didn't need anything really more than a 48. So it's a large, like I say, the desk format I think is a 64 size. So it's just because the patch bay is inserted into that section here, and then we took the
6, isn't it? Oh yeah, because you had the stereos. My apologies.
Yeah, so stereo's gone.
Yes.
But what he then had done is, of course, it's all recapped, redone, and then all the bulbs and all the lights and everything are LED.
Great.
So the only one that's so it's more efficient. So one of the classics with the VUs is the bulbs constantly go.
They do, yeah.
So you're always forever arsing around with it, and of course they're not particularly cheap, and they emit a lot of heat and so on. So this desk stays, and this has been on all day, and it's.
Yeah. Didn't you tell me you had some custom built PSU?
No, there's a thing called the atomic clock.
Right.
So there's a guy over in I think Los Angeles who unfortunately got shot. So he got murdered.
That sucks.
It started like kind of midway last year. But the guy who built this, who refurbs the desks in the Netherlands, he's now taking on that job and going to get something because we've got 2 power supplies in here and.
Does the job come with a bulletproof vest?
Yeah, innit. But they're not overly efficient, and they do have a tendency. They've got these different cards, and they have a tendency to sort of kind of freak out. So what we want to try and get is a new power supply, which will kind of run the desk, and they'll be our sort of kind of backups.
Yeah.
But they have buckets on, so each section we don't have to turn. We can leave this desk basically on, so it works almost like a modern console. We can turn it on and off daily,
right, without
any major. It's never had any. There's some issues with power supplies going down, but it's an old desk,
It happens.
But it's got it's a G series body, which has the original, so the G series compressor, which we found out is basically a hybrid between a DBX 160.
Yeah.
And an SSL. So when they made the desks, they had this kind of hybrid thing they did.
Right.
So as a result, it sounds a little bit more aggressive. I've got the SSL G series.
Yeah.
The X-Logic one.
Yeah.
Which that sounds to me a lot smoother. So as an overall compressor, this is great for like rock, a bit more hard hitting stuff like that. And I found, and it makes sense with it being a DBX. I was like, oh, that makes sense because that's quite a hard hitting compressor. But we've got so it's G series EQs in the first 24. It then goes E series up to channel 41, and then we're back to G series again. Okay. So you've just got that bell curve on the EQ on there.
Yeah, gotcha.
And it's a great desk. They're wicked. It's like I say, it's reliable. Yeah, the channels are quirky. They have their own thing. It distorts really lovely. You drive the channels. It's just like. I did a little direct comparison to the wave stuff just to see. Yeah. Because I figured out the way I use it when I mix. I insert the channels like a plugin basically into Pro Tools. Right. So I just use the insert function. Yep. And then I'll have the channel strip. So I just did it on some toms. So what I did, I set the normal G series or E series, and I was like, okay, let me just see what I would do with the EQ, mute it, and then put the insert on, and did the same thing. And I was like, the only difference is it's like the depth is there because of course we're going through transformers. It's going through conversion again, etc. But they're pretty close. It's not too bad. So it's good to know.
They did their job right.
Yeah.
So
they behave pretty similarly, and I'm quite surprised actually with how plugins relate quite nicely to the actual gear. So having used the SSL stuff, now coming and using an SSL, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty much what I expected. And I found that the first time I saw that was with the Abbey Road, the TG12345 desk, the sort of kind of the aeroplane faders. They had one in State of the Arc in Richmond, which is unfortunately closed down. Yes, it's a shame. But they have Waves have done a plugin of that, so I'd used that plugin quite a lot. I quite like it, especially with the compressors, they're very aggressive and so on. So when I got to use that desk, I was like, interesting. I'm expecting this. Yeah. And it was pretty much on the money. I'm like, wow, that's cool. So you can actually train yourself up. So things like the 1176s, the 2As and stuff that we've got and things like that.
So the plugins are pretty much...
The plugins are pretty much you just literally transferring that information across. Right. Which is really cool. Yeah. It's like, so you can actually train yourself to use high-end or more outboard gear by using the actual plugin that does that job.
Fantastic.
Which is quite a nice thing, really.
Yeah, that's great, man. I want to move away from the studio stuff a little bit. You are a man of many talents, apart from being an incredible musician and a great engineer. You do Krav Maga as well.
Yes.
And you're quite a high level now. You're a master?
No, expert,
right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's like your black belt, basically.
Okay. And you don't have any duns yet.
No. So the way that they work the system. So there is a grading system within it. Although it's a little bit grading systems in this sort of kind of style. So if you're not familiar with Krav Maga, it's really
close quarters Israeli.
Yeah, it essentially means like hand fighting or like contact combat. That's what it's Hebrew. Krav Maga means that. So basically, it's a almost like a system that's drunk in from everything else. So there's bits of boxing, jiu-jitsu, judo,
they've just
wrestling,
everything. Like mixed martial arts for the street.
Yeah, so they take all the bits that they think are quite effective and go, that's nice, that works, and so on. Whereas a lot of sports systems or martial arts, let's say, within the both sort of realm, I think mixed martial arts is probably the closest sort of kind of...
because everything else is rigid and it's got its rules.
Yeah.
You follow these movements.
Because the idea of that mixed martial art is we're taking lots of the best, you're cherry-picking the things that work for that person the best. And if you were to throw that into a situation without a ring, and you said, look, mixed martial artists, no competitors, no competition, just do your thing, there's a certain set of skills there that they can operate. And that's similar to the Krav Maga idea, that you're not just dealing with people with open hand or fist, or you're not dealing with just floor. There's not a one-on-one thing. It could potentially move to several opponents. There could be weapons involved, environmental factors, because of course if you're fighting
outside,
in a car,
stairwell,
so all the things, the idea of it was a system devised by a chap called Imi Lichtenfeld, who developed it in the kind of latter half of the 1900s, so like 1936, I think he started, maybe earlier than that. Basically, it was the fascist invasion and the fascist influence, where he then was, being a Jewish kind of young man, he was an athlete, he was an Olympian, sort of, he was very fit, and him and his friends were then protecting the Jewish quarters from the fascist sort of kind of like uprisings and people taking on the sort of kind of beliefs of the fascist sort of kind of regimes. So he got into a lot of fights protecting, and what they found was they were usually against people who were armed with sticks, batons, knives, etc. And it was always outnumbered. So there was always more combatants. So what they found was like you have to work quickly, short, sharp movements, etc. And that developed in the military system in what then was Palestine. So that's where he basically escaped to avoid the Nazi kind of capture. He then trained that up in the Israeli Defense Force once Israel became Israel. And that's a system that they developed, this more hand-to-hand fighting. And working it in the military system, it's just the finishing moves will be of a sort of specific thought process. And of course you have tools. a gun, weapon, etc. What then, from that, when he retired, he came out of the military and then civilianized it, essentially. So developed a more civilian-based system. And that's where the master that I know and trained under is a guy called A.R. Yanilov. And he started training with IMI when he was 15, I think. Right. And he's now the main guy of the system that we work in with, is Krav Maga Global. But the idea with this system is, because there's no kind of rules, so to speak, everything's adaptable, which relates quite nicely to music and quite nicely to that, because in the sense of
the general,
you learn your skill, you learn your scale, and then let's improvise, so to speak. So it's kind of like an understanding of a kind of slightly more violent conversation, let's say.
Right, so a bunch of Italians, basically.
yeah.
Why are you guys shouting? We're just excited. No need to fight, guys. We're just chatting.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's quite nuts. But the idea of it's there are techniques, and there are kind of I suppose preferred movements, which is like, okay, this is the most efficient movement of that to solve that problem, so to speak. But they can be twisted and adapted to personal sort of move, etc. And each one of these techniques is then placed into a syllabus, which we then have in families of. So you'd have like self-defense, which would work on the close punches, etc. Then you'd have things like headlocks, chokes, dangerous grabs, holds, etc. All standing, for example. Then you'd deal with weapons, so knife, stick, and then that moves on to then things like handguns and so forth. And then you start working through angles, and then you start working with multiple attackers. And so all these problems are basically then just developed. So if you think that the simple act of punching can be done in 360 degrees when I face you, but also 360 degrees around you. So within that sort of kind of, so I can go down to the head or up to the body, etc. But I could also be coming down onto the back of your head or so on. So there's all the different angles that it can work with. And it's then trying to figure out what's the most efficient solution which will cover all of this. So then it breaks into sort of basic functional movements, which we then advance and change slightly to suit the new problem. And the idea of that is it makes it quite easy to learn. It's quite quick. Yeah,
I remember you gave me a few lessons in Toronto, and when we were touring the States, we had a few sessions. Yeah, it's definitely something
It's a really interesting system, because again, it's the idea of it. It had to be quick to learn, easy to maintain,
and implement as well.
Yeah, and implement under general stress, because a lot of tech. And again, if you think about the experience factor versus an experienced engineer, when stressed, will be able to rely on that experience and go, okay, I know I'm stressed, panicked almost, but I'm able to solve the problem comfortably. A very new green sort of kind of like wet behind the ears engineer will just crumble.
Succumb to, even though they technically are.
They know what they're doing. They just haven't had that experience. So it's equally the same if you take a fighter who's done 2 or 3 basic sort of kind of like years of work. They're going to not remember half of that stuff, if anything. And one of the things that they try to implement, and again, it's only as good as the people training you, I suppose, but you try to implement this concept that Krav Maga works off your normal instinctive behaviours. So as a person, if somebody threw something at you, you're probably going to go like this, or like this idea. And if somebody punched or grabbed you or something, or you threw something straight, you'd probably do something like this. So that just incorporates into the movement. So when you're doing something like this, instead of me kind of panicking, I'm using that as my defense and that as a counter. And what they do is they realized from the early stages, if you defend and then you wait and then counter, which is a normal,
losing valuable seconds.
You lose time and you lose the advantage, because what happens is the assailant is in the process of doing their job. So they're very focused. So they're like, right, I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. punches. If I do that first punch and I'm defended, I've got no reason to not be sending the second, because you didn't really persuade me otherwise. So the idea of the system is to implement a counter-attack as soon as you can, hopefully simultaneously.
Try and step outside the target.
And what that will do is it will slow down to to a certain extent, for a brief second, the person's thought process.
Yeah,
so if I'm able to defend and hit you back whilst you're sending that strike, so I'm defending and hitting simultaneously, that crashing of the computer, so to speak, means that there's a very small second that you can then respond with the next movement, which could, of course, be escape, evade. It could be continue through the target, move on to new opponent. And it's so unpredictable because you just don't know. It's like saying, you catch somebody with a punch, they can fall over, they might stand still, they might laugh. Who knows? Depends on how strong you are, how good your technique is.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you can learn that relatively quickly. So within a few months, you can learn to implement these concepts, which means that you have got a better chance of survival to a certain. And of course, the longer you do it, the more techniques you understand. Hopefully, the better you become, and then it's kind of in. But the difference between, like I just said at the start, where the badge system or the belt system works, is because people like results. It's funny, having taught when we're doing like degree stuff, how like young students get really hung up on numbers. Yeah. And like in the Krav world, watching people do gradings and stuff, how everybody gets hung up on numbers. Yeah. It's really funny. So I'm like, but you're a doctor. Why do you give a shit? Yeah. I've got people who are like captains of like pilots and military people and professionals like lawyers, police, everything. And they all get super pissed when somebody got 71 and they got 70 or 69. They're like, why are they two more than me? And I'm like, it doesn't mean anything. Mate,
I don't. I think especially in the world of studying, music or music production or all these sorts of things. So many times I've said to people that they're bummed out about having a lower grade than they thought that they were supposed to get. I'm like, remember that this is all subjective. Your marker puts, as much as they try and be objective, there is some subjectivity involved. And also, end of the day, you have the experience of having done that, right? Whether the result was what you wanted or not, but you've now taken that and you can learn from it, right? You can apply that to the next thing, right? And when you go out there, very rarely is somebody going to ask you for your grades when you're a first year at college.
100%.
Even if you get or don't get a degree, the end of the day, I've never been asked to show my degree to anyone. I tell them I've got one, but even if I didn't have one, I mean, really, my work came from being willing to do work experience.
The real sort of kind of
having the right attitude.
Yeah, I think the real thing from the degree kind of concept, especially what I had anyway, maybe it's not so much with the way things are going in certain fields of the industry, but that idea of becoming autonomous, learning how to learn. And the funny thing is, it's learning how to learn and learning where you are with your learning, if that makes any sense. It's kind of the maddest sentence I think you could ever say. But it's one of the things when you do anything that's not definitive. So
any art,
which is everything pretty much, walking, talking, driving. There's no definitive action.
So we're going to grade you on your walking. So sorry, son, your stride is 6 centimeters too long.
Really, if you're putting one foot in front of the other and you're upright and able to continue without
falling over,
even with support, you are walking. You are successful. Well done. That is literally the job. Whether or not you're doing it with flair or style or anything, that's the subjective element. And the problem is, people are quite self-aware and self-obsessed or absorbed. And when it comes to, and again, this is the same from that Krav Maga thing, because with the gradings, we have this practitioner level, then graduate level, then it's expert. So it's like, it's 10 grades for you to become to an expert level. And that takes, hopefully, 10 years, roughly, give or take. It doesn't. With most people, they do it quicker, but it's around that. But I would say, after 10 years, when they say you're an expert at something, it is about that. Yeah, I didn't really think I fully understood what was going on. Even though I'd got my grade, I'd shown the physicalities of what to do. I was like, but I still don't really get it. I thought I did, until then I get it. And the thing is, you as a person, we all think that effort equals reward, because that's what you're sort of kind of taught as a kid. to a certain degree.
You work hard, you'll get there one day.
Yeah, and it's like, so what people take from that is, if I put in a lot of effort, or even if I choose to put effort in, the results should be quantified with good results. And the amount of people when I was teaching on the degree who would contact me, nice people and sound of mind people, reasonable, rational, understanding human beings, they would be like, I think I've got a poor mark. I think my work was worth more. And I'm like, okay, why do you think that? Well, I put in a lot of effort for this. And I'm like, so what? That doesn't mean shit. The thing is, what you think... And don't get me wrong, I know this 100%, because when I first started recording, 4-track sort of style recording, when I first got hold of a 4-track when I was about 15, I thought what I was recording was like the bollocks. I was like, this is amazing. I took it round and I showed some friends and I was like, check this out. I've done this record. It's like the first thing, and it was terrible. It was like badly played, poorly mixed, crap songwriting, poor structure. It was shit, really. But to me, at that time, it was phenomenal. Yeah. Because it's something that was just beyond what I was able to do. As I started to progress, I started to realise where the errors are. And you do this with everything. You're like, I can play guitar, I'm great. Listen to this band, we're so good. And you're like, actually, we're all a bag of shite, aren't we? It's like, we haven't really got our shit together yet. And then you get to a point where you know how good you are in your head. And if you play well, you're like, I'm happy with that performance. And people may or may not like it. And you're okay with that. Yeah. And the funny thing is, every time I've played and I thought I'm like, I smashed that. Like, I killed that gig. That was, for me, everything was perfect. I'm like chatting to people, everyone's kind of quiet, and they're just like, yeah, so anyway, next week we're doing. I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird, because I thought I've really smashed that. Yeah. And then I play like a couple of weeks later, and I play like shit. And they're like, man, this is the best I've ever heard you play. I'm like, what? Yeah. Oh, obviously I've got it all wrong then. Yeah. But that is literally the fact. It's like, what I think is good and what they think is good is different.
Yeah, it's subjective. Art is. So, but I think, we're also highly overcritical of ourselves.
Some people are not. Some people are.
That's true. That's true. But
I think the people who do well at stuff tend to be quite critical of their own performances, because we're like, we can always do better. Because again, going back to what we said at the start, it's that idea of I need to be better than them. And what
I think for me, and I think this probably just comes with experience and maturity, maybe. For me, it's just, am I better than my me of yesterday? And that's, every day you got to take stock.
We should always be, because to a certain degree, we're wiser. So even if we make mistakes or do a product which isn't as good, it's like, what was it that made that worse, so I can then understand how to make it better in the future.
Exactly.
Oh, was I tired, or was it just because I didn't give too much of a shit? Was I just not being professional today? It's like, what was it that sort of kind of did that? Yeah. But if you look at it from that point of like what we said earlier, like the concept of, if I said, right, T, me and you are working together, and my job is to try and do what you do better than you, and your job is to try and do what I do better than me. Yeah. But in the process of doing that, you're going to come up with stuff, and if I get lazy and I just plateau, you will surpass me.
It's true, yeah.
It might take a week, 2 weeks, 2 years, 10 years, whatever. And that's the same with everything. And going back to the Krav thing, it's the same. If I just plateau and I don't continue to learn and assess and so on, then I will always sort of kind of sit at this point, and then you will be better than me. Yeah. So from my perspective, having the kind of up and comings are as important as the experience.
Yeah, because it just makes a little bit of fire under your ass.
Yeah.
Like, hold on.
So I'm like,
somebody here who's looking to take my job.
And the thing is, because of that, I never stop learning. I'm always learning new things. I'm always learning new ways, new techniques, new concepts, and then trying it and seeing if it works. Yeah. So there's just more information, more skill. Software, I'm always trying to learn new software. So I'm now working my way onto Cubase, just so I can know it. Yeah. It's just in case. Yeah. but it keeps the grey matter kind of bubbling. It keeps you kind of your foot one step ahead of everyone else.
Keep your brain active, otherwise it's just gonna fucking rot.
If everybody starts doing that within that sort of kind of realm of the industry, or with the people you surround yourself in, everybody's constantly pushing. It means that you all will do that all the time. If everybody, like you say, you surround yourself with kind of people who are below you, you are the top dog, so to speak.
And it's all left up to you to innovate.
Yeah, and I think what happens is people strive for that position to be the biggest fish, and once they get to that position, they're like,
right,
I'm here. And then they're done. They're like, I've achieved my goal, I'm done. And it's like, if you have no goal in that sense of it's never achieved, not to the point it's like I feel empty inside.
Yeah, no, like, absolutely.
But you're always kind of pushing yourself. You're always like, I need to just keep going.
Make sure that you never arrive.
Because there's always somebody else who's going to be better. It's like, I always was, play guitar and I sing and I do this and do this. And then you meet a guitarist, it's like, man, you're a much better guitarist than me. And man, you can sing better than me. Damn it, you're 10 years younger than me. It's like, this sucks. Right, I better start getting my shit together and carrying on or trying something new. But it's like, you look at it and go, there's always going to be someone better than you. Always. And there'll be someone better than him who will come along. And that's, the circle of life.
That it is. Yeah. Right. I think we'll close that off there with the Elton John song.
Literally, which was done on this desk.
Oh, well, there you go.
I don't think the Circle of Life was, but Lion King was done on here.
Amazing.
Something was done on it. Definitely something on the Lion King.
That was quite serendipitous. Lovely, man. Thank you so much for doing this, and hopefully we can do it again sometime in the summer.
Yeah, definitely. We'll do it outside.
Yeah.
We'll have a barbecue. We'll get the braai on.
A couple of beers and the barbecue.
Yeah, mate.
Right. Lovely, man. Thank you very much.
Cool, mate. Take it easy.
Right, well, there we have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed that as much as I have. It was great catching up with Hugh in that lovely studio. I will be sharing all his social media stuff and the website for the studio, and you can get in contact with him there. As always, I'll be sharing my social media as well. I also have a Patreon page, so if you like what you see, you can support me there. It's patreon.com/HeySoundGuy, and there you can support the cause. As always, like, share, subscribe, get the message out there. Thank you. Bye.